Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are joined by the Executive Chairman, Frank Holmes, and the President and CEO, Aydin Kilic of HIVE Digital Technologies. We're going to be covering this week's big press release in relation to the Paraguay facility or the acquisition of Bitfarms, plus how this sets them up for growth in 2025. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of HIVE, what you thought about this big acquisition, and your outlook for the remainder of 2025. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay, guys, so that's right. Today's podcast, highly anticipated. We've welcomed back the President and CEO, Aydin Kilic from HIVE Digital Technologies, along with the Chairman, Frank Holmes, to talk about the massive Paraguay acquisition news this week. You guys, we've been saying all along, 2025 is the year of HIVE, and this is another massive step in the right direction. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for making the time.
Great to be guys.
Hey, so I know we just had you on recently here, but there's been so many big developments. We were just talking about that before we started filming. Why don't you take a second here and walk us through the details of this Paraguay announcement that came out on Tuesday this week?
Yeah, I think, Frank, did you want to?
No, go ahead, Aydin.
Well, I think
one and phase two. We have phase one and phase two.
So I think the really exciting thing is that we're at 6 exahash, and this gets us to 25 exahash. So the cadence of it, energization is April 1st for the first 100 megawatts. We are buying a materially complete site, which we saw. We actually visited the site in December on our last trip down to Paraguay. And so the first phase of this is 10 buildings that are going to be air-cooled, 100 megawatts. But what we're purchasing is the land buildings and a completed 240 MVA substation with 200 megawatts usable capacity. So as that site gets, and closing will be ahead of April 1st, closings in Q1 this quarter. So we'll close on it. We will light up the first 100 megawatts in April, May, filled with ASICs. And then for phase two, it will be hydro. And so we'll roll those on through the latter half of the summer, anticipating the full 25 exahash being lit up and hashing by September. And in addition to all of that, this is in addition to our own 100 megawatt site, right? So you have phase 100 megawatt, phase 200 megawatt. Our own 100 megawatt site is 300 megawatts in Paraguay, and completion for our site and energization is still slated for May. So you're going to see a big hash rate ramp in late spring of this year, which is super exciting, number one. Number two, I think what's really important to note is we're very strategic at HIVE, we're data-driven, and so we saw a phenomenal opportunity to buy the Bitmain S21 plus Hydro ASICs in December, and we bought surplus because we actually knew we were going to do bigger things in Paraguay. And so we of that order, when we announced that we were going to be at 15 exahash, 13 exahash of that was slated for our existing facilities, and the balance of 2 exahash actually surplus. So those 2 exahash are going to go on the second phase of the Bitfarms site, if that makes sense, right? I see you nodding, Bryce. So I think it, and so the first 2 exahash of gear is already earmarked for this site, and so we'll be purchasing approximately 10.5 more exahash, 6 air-cooled and 4.5 hydro. So we're really excited to deploy rapidly. And, I think one thing that's worth mentioning is when you look at the track record at HIVE, before I joined, Frank led what I would say was the best M&A deal in the industry. And that was the acquisition of Lachute, which was Canada's largest crypto mine at the time, 30 megawatts built in 2016. And, look, in 2018, 30 megawatts was behemoth, right?
Yeah.
And so Frank led that acquisition, and it included all the S9s for free, And when I joined Hive in 2021, that was to oversee the acquisition of New Brunswick, which, guess what, was also Canada's largest Bitcoin mine, single site. And now we are the presumptive largest operators in Paraguay through M&A. So we're really good at building. We're really, I think our team, I think we're phenomenal at R&D and being innovative. But when it comes to corp dev, we've also pulled off some really great moves. And that's why I'm so excited about this year ahead. It is going to be the year of Hive.
And as we mentioned, the growth strategy is pretty cemented in now. We're having a baby. 9 months is going to be a beautiful baby. That baby is going to be 3% of the global network. That baby is going to go take us from 120 million to 500 million in revenue, excluding our holder position. So yeah, and what is the future growth of our peers trade at? 5 times exahash. We're getting 1. That's where I think the shrewd investor were calling us yesterday, buying it, and we see it again today. It's a real forward-thinking investor that is looking at that position, and we've done it with the minimalist amount of dilution. When you take a look at shares, we will still be the lean, mean machine we have. Right now, we're doing $6 million in revenue per employee. And this can go to 25 million, which I think is just a sweet SaaS model. Also, we help the government out. I mean, we become that if they have this surplus energy, they don't use it. It goes back to Brazil. If they pay to other countries, they get no pay or slow pay. With us, they're going to get paid every month, US dollars. And slowly, over time, their currency's been going down, but all of a sudden, US dollars are stronger. It's just a great positioning. And their leader, we were thrilled that he was one of very few that was invited from Latin America to Trump's inauguration. Canada wasn't invited. England wasn't invited. I mean, it was interesting to see. Mexico wasn't invited, but the president of Paraguay was. And the economist that follows the Vienna School, Austrian School of Economics, basically, McNallie from Argentina, he was invited. Mr. Bitcoin Latin America out of El Salvador, he was invited. So we are positioned in a country that embraces what we're doing. And that was very important.
A couple of questions on that. In terms of and this has just come to me as we're talking now, in terms of payment for the energy, how do you pay? Do you pay in dollars or could they accept Bitcoin for payment?
Yeah, I don't know if they have the infrastructure to set up a wallet yet to accept that. But the biggest bill is the energy company, and they're looking for US dollars.
US dollars, because obviously it's strong, keeps the inflation out from their own currency. And secondly, I mean, obviously we had you on the podcast literally just over a week ago, and it's now obvious that you were having those discussions. And when did this sort of opportunity first arrive on your doorstep, effectively?
It started to evolve with all the drama of Riot and the Bitfarms, and there was a vacuum of leadership, and Ben came in to be the leader, and Ben ends up being great stability, puts a firewall between Riot and Bitfarms, and at the same time he does the major stronghold acquisition in the US, which he believes he has a gigawatt of electricity in front of him.
Yeah.
And he'd like to focus on that. And that's where it started. It was a jump ball of who's going to win the election. We didn't know, but we started talking just before the election. And I think after the election, it was a much safer jurisdiction to go back into America. We moved our head office. I don't think we would have ever moved our head office to the US if the previous administration was in power, because of just anti-Bitcoin and assault on the industry. And so I think that made it for us safer here. That made it safer for Ben. And I think it's good and clear for Ben has a very well-defined strategy for what he sees. He's going to need CapEx for a gigawatt. and it gives him some cash now. It gives him capital to expand his operation in the U.S. So it's a win for him, and for us is green energy. Remember, that's the hard part, was to be able to get green energy. And where we've looked at some places for solar and wind, well, a lot of times if that's not working, you need big batteries. If you don't have the batteries, you have to go to the grid and get coal energy. Well, that's just sort of, we want to try to stay as strict as possible to the narrative that we're green, renewable energy. And Paraguay fits it perfectly. The other thing in the geopolitics world is when Putin invaded Ukraine, energy around the world all went up a penny. And for some places, that's a 50% lift in the cost of energy, even if it was not related. It wasn't Germany, it didn't matter. In Canada, they became protectionistic for all data centers. If you have green pasture out there and you're going to get electricity, it could take 3 to 5 years to build a data center. They became protectionist. Sweden turned around and put on a huge energy tax to stop data centers from coming to their country because they became so concerned over Putin. But Paraguay is so far removed from all of that. And Paraguay has that surplus of energy, and it's better that it goes to use this way. And the president of the country 6 months ago was in San Francisco, or in Menlo Park, visiting Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA. So we feel that we're in good company. He's a smart, good-looking guy, 45 years old, studying America. He's got Washington, D.C. experience. And that's really important. I know intimately what happened, and there's maybe a distraction to this interview, but what happened in Colombia over the weekend, just to give you an idea how crazy this guy Petro is. I mean, they said he did at 3:00 in the morning. He was on drugs or drunk. What he wrote to Trump was outrageous, and Rubio, he just doesn't take BS. Well, it was more destructive than when they blew up the American Airlines with passengers and the narcos were running rampant in Colombia. What Trump did to their economy on paper destroyed all the coffee business, all the flower business coming for Valentine's Day, massive layoffs, all their exports from petroleum products that were coming predominantly. The U.S. was the biggest buyer. That all of a sudden was non-competitive. And he wiped out their economy. Who fixed it? Uribe. And Duque, where's Duque? He's in Washington. It's those connections with Rubio. They all start saying, look, if this guy is off the rock, we're not going to do this. So they figure out a truce to try to solve that problem. And what the difference was, don't mess with a guy like Trump like that. Do not, it's unheard of that they're criminals and they're illegal and they committed a crime, are being sent back, and they're not allowed to land. And so you see that the people that solve the problem from Latin America have experience in Washington. The president of Paraguay has experience in Washington. Very important, their eco and network system.
In terms of the actual sites, are they located close to each other, your site and the one you're about to purchase?
A little bit more than a touchdown pass away, but they are, it's I would say the best way to think of how these sites are located, beside each one of our sites are massive regional substations. Like our site, the site we're acquiring, has a 200 megawatt substation just for our site. But, and I should tweet these photos. If you look at an aerial, because we flew a helicopter into our site and the Bitfarms site we're acquiring, are these massive regional substations. So we're close to the point of distribution, right? Which obviously is strategic and helpful. But these substations are like multi 100 megawatt. They're massive. They're massive. So it's more getting as close to the point of, if not immediate generation, but rather distribution. So they're in rural areas. Yeah.
The reason I was asking, Aiden, was more of a economies of scale. The fact that if you get looked, you may be able to make some savings in terms of managing the sites or staffing the sites because they're
I mean,
proximity
each
close with.
site stands on its own 2 feet with substantive scale. Once you're in the 100 or 200 megawatt range, it's already massive.
The site we're building, to help I was just saying, the site we're building, if there's no heavy traffic, it's an hour away.
Okay.
Then it's another hour away to the next site.
It's a bit further than I was thinking about. Yeah.
Then you're going to be a 3-hour drive to get to the other facility. But they're all relatively close to each other. It's a good highway system. It's a toll road. So it's not when you get outside of the city, the traffic drops off as you get on that toll road. So we feel that it's just great. We're excited about it. We're going to be now the biggest player in Latin America. And so that's another win for us.
And in terms of, you've already mentioned the political side of it. In terms of the power side of it, how does, I'm assuming this compared to the rest of your facilities around the world in terms of energy cost, does that fit in with what you're currently paying?
It's slightly less, our overall cost. We've been hedging right now for this year under 2 cents in Sweden, but then it gets this funky tax of 2.6 cents or something per megawatt. You think of
kilowatt hour,
per hour, kilowatt, and so that runs up the cost to close to say a nickel. And I think in New Brunswick, the cheapest steady would be probably in Quebec. Aydin, when you say that's the cheapest?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say this puts us our Paraguay expansion. So there's a few reasons why. The scale that gets us to sort of that 1.5-2 billion market cap range, which really puts us, I think, in an attractive position for institutions. Number two, it's green energy, right? We haven't talked much about that, but why it has been a bigger challenge, a road less taken, is we were very resolute about ensuring it was green energy that we expanded with, and it's all hydro in Paraguay. And then, of course, the power price is very attractive, and so it will bring down our global average cost of power. And I think that there was, in another podcast we did yesterday, the gentleman, he was very familiar with the landscape, just 3.9 cents plus taxes, et cetera. In Paraguay is sort of the going rate, and then, which is fantastic. And then the other piece is, and we allude to this in our press release, is a capex on $1 per megawatt basis. It's about 400 grand a megawatt to build, including the substation, right? So you've got your own high voltage substation, and you get all of that, land, buildings, et cetera, for 400 grand a megawatt, which is very attractive, right? And so that all of those virtues stand for our own site, but moreover, for the Bitfarms site, time to market is incredibly attractive, right? Because we'll be energized, it's, Jan 30, right? So in about 3 months, we're looking to energize that first 100 megawatts of the Bitfarms site, in addition to our own site, which would follow a month later, right? So it's not just scale, 2 years down the road. This is imminent, right? And we're really thrilled about that, And by the way, I think it's worth noting. Let's talk about Hashrate Economics for a second. So right now we're at about a $60 hash price. Bitcoin's holding very steadily at about 105,000, which is great. Difficulty actually dipped a little bit on Monday to 108. Okay, Now get this. Where are we? We are at January post-halving. So if you look at let's do a little bull market history lesson here, right? So 2016, okay, halving was in June of 2016. It was the following summer in 2017 when HIVE went public, by the way, the Bitcoin started to rip. And it wasn't until December of 2017, okay, remember that, December 2017, Bitcoin hit its first real all-time high of 20,000. I remember I was on Bay Street that week talking to Fidelity. Now, let's go to the next halving event, right? 2020, May. Okay. So, sorry. It was May. So Then it was the following February that we hit the first all-time high Bitcoin, 65,000. And then November 2021, we hit the next, almost went to 70,000. Well, guess what, right? We had April halving 2024. And where are we now? Well, we're just about to get into February. So I really think the bull market is in the year ahead of us. Obviously, there was some amazing catalysts, right? Trump's inauguration, Trump's election, moreover. But I think now with the U.S. Treasury considering Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, the U.S. banks being able to custody Bitcoin, these are massive. And I think that these are great tailwinds. In addition, right, these are great catalysts in addition to sort of the historical pattern. So, if we're looking at, we're at $60 hash price a day, right? When we announced our purchase of the S21 plus Hydro, after we put our model, we always put a 5 cent cost just to be conservative, right? Staff, electricity, everything. It was a 10-month ROI of $14 a terahash. These things are 15 joules a terahash. They're rockets, right? Now, that's a $55 hash price when we modeled it back then. Well, guess what? If we hit an $80 hash price, that ROI shrinks to sub 6 months, right? We're talking 4 or 5 months. And so you pay the machines back immediately, and then you're just like free cash flowing through the bull market. So we're really stoked about that. And so, good luck is one of those things. You kind of always have to be working hard, and once you're in the field and your shovel's in the ground, you make hay when the sun shines. So the timing is really exciting for us. But this has been a long time coming, where we've been very carefully and strategically, like, there's so many sites we've looked at throughout the US, all over the world, Europe. It's not like we just oh, hey, like, let's just do that. No, this has been countless hours, months, years of finding the perfect scenario. And again, to Frank's point, I think that it's a really great deal for Ben too, because it allows him to focus on his vision of pursuing that gigawatt. And I really enjoyed dealing with Ben. He's brilliant, young CEO. We get along very well. We're both very technical. So I think it's going to be a good year ahead. And you know what? HIVE and Bitfarms, we were amongst the first crypto miners, right? Back in the day, to go public. So we kind of have that pedigree, or that heritage, if you will, and Canadian too, Bryce? So
we've got as well, yeah. Three of you. I think the three first public miners were you guys with HUT, Bitfarms, HIVE, and HUT were the first three before the likes of what we see nowadays.
I think it's a win-win for both our strategies. They're just different. And do you want green apples? You want red apples? All I know is the apples are very good, and there's no worms in them. So that's what I like about it. The other part is when we went down there, it was great reconnaissance for Aydin, being an electrical engineer, was what works, what machines work, what don't, what issues and challenges did Bitfarms experience in the first 80 megawatts that they built. So you find out it's hot, it's always hot, and it's humid. So what does that mean if it's hot and humid? What are the best machines to manage that? How much water consumption? So we went and saw several big properties and asked lots of hardcore questions in that process while we're negotiating to understand the Bitfarms transaction. So it was a win-win for us in understanding what we're really getting into, and so win-win for both companies as we pursue different strategies.
Yeah, that's great. And we actually have Ben on Tuesday next week, so we can hear that side of the story as well. But to your point, Aydin, we think very highly of Ben, and he actually talked while they were developing that site about some of the benefits of developing in South America. And Frank, you obviously talked about how that political climate is really warming up to Bitcoin and miners down there. So all of that is great. We wanted to transition a little bit to the U.S. comments you made there. So obviously those big catalysts in the United States with the Trump administration, we've seen a lot of companies, it sounds like Bitfarms, really gravitating towards U.S. operations. You guys do not have any operations in the United States. However, you have come out and said you're going to move your headquarters to San Antonio, where you're based, Frank. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? How does that work if you're based in the United States, operations outside? And how do you think this positions you competitively compared to some of these other miners that are really focusing on the domestic operations?
I think that the journey of moving our head office is predominantly what we'll hire in San Antonio will be Sarbanes-Oxley internal audit and some one or two people. The intellectual capital that we have today will be in Vancouver. They'll stay in Vancouver. But when you're going to be filing under GAAP, not IFRS, you need a GAAP expert, and you need someone that really understands the tying and ticking away of the disclosure. And Anthony, you're an accountant, so when you go from IFRS to GAAP, what you find is there's much more attachment. So anytime you have a number, it has to show up everywhere else where it relates to. And rather than someone figure out it's on page 17, it has to give a bibliography. You think of writing an essay, it's a bibliography for every number you have.
It's very repetitive, Gap. Very repetitive.
And very tedious stuff. And
even the paragraphs are the same. It's like they've just copied and pasted paragraphs all through the document. When you talk about a particular cost or a revenue line, it's copied through all the way through the document. Yeah. And that's why some of these documents, just for quarterly earnings, are 200 pages long. And I have to read them.
Yeah. And no doubt that's why the quant funds read this stuff with AI now and look for any of the word changes. What verbs, adjectives, and nouns changed? And it's, to me, it's interesting. This is what our world has come to when you think of Renaissance technology, with how they look at these markets. But for us, I think that coming here allows us to qualify to go into these other indexes that are in America. There's no technology fund in Canada. It's all part of a diversified portfolio. America's 40 to 1. It's 10 to 1 in population, but it's 40 to 1 when it comes to risk venture capital and technology funds. There's just nothing up there. But here it's immense and large. And then you saw last year Palantir leave the New York Stock Exchange and move to NASDAQ, not because NASDAQ's over, because the QQQ ETF is so friggin' big. It's over 300 billion. And immediately, all of a sudden, Palantir had to come in and they had to buy the heck out of Palantir, and it pops on day one, 20%. It goes up 80% from that. We saw that with HUD 8 when they did the RTO, basically moved to Miami. And then a year later, they qualified for going into the Russell 2000. That created a huge lift that goes into so many indexes in America that are pension funds. I know this from my fund business. When you go to Latin America, 4 pension fund groups. That's it. 4 people you deal with. The whole country. Mexico, 6. Peru, 4. Like, it shocks you. In America, it's 100. And so you have a lot of them in these big pension funds go into indexing. They will turn around and say, okay, our small composition will be the S&P or MSCI index. And we have seen tremendous rotations of a stock going in and out of an MSCI index. We have seen countries all of a sudden get punished because they've been cut back on what's in the MSCI index. So this positioning for us, I think, only enhances our liquidity. And that's why it's a sophisticated investor, a forward-looking investor can see what we're doing in our long-term strategy this year is to be positioned and be contrary to all these convertible notes that are to buy more Bitcoin. We want to grow as much as possible organically. Bitcoin at the end of December was up over 60% year over year. And if we have to grow our business, we would sell Bitcoin. We're not afraid of doing that and just re-put it. When we did it 18 months ago, we immediately did it for machines and got our money back, as I was saying, in less than 9 months. We got our Bitcoin back and grew it. So that's been our business model.
In terms of the update that came out, and you were talking about sites around the world, it looked like Iceland was omitted from the update. Are you still operating in Iceland?
No, it's gone dormant just for costs, and we explored maybe other opportunities. But they are one of the other countries that really start to goose their cost of to go HPC. So they want to focus HPC. But when you go HPC in Iceland, it becomes, you have to be really sensitive because we had GPU chips there. The biggest danger there is it's always windy, but it's volcanic dust. And volcanic dust will take the paint off your car in a year. And so when you're spending $70,000 for a chip, you're not spending $700 or even $7,000. You're paying $70,000. You've got to be really thoughtful about the engineering for the HPC that's there. And we've explored it, but for us, our experience says, you know what, it's more difficulty. So we focus in Sweden and Canada.
Okay, just for clarification, because I know that we've even on our website we've got you down as a location as Iceland, and we've even got a map pointing to where you're located. So we'll make sure that gets amended.
Yeah, it's a recent update. As we focus, we're still in Canada, Sweden, and now Paraguay. It's like, where's the best place to grow? And so it was a relatively small 4 megawatts. And, Iceland was managing their own curtailment issues as well. So at one point we had some modest growth there, but, with the curtailments, et cetera, and directionally they're going for more HPC. I think we were down to 4 megawatts, and it was sort of not a good. And then you got to upgrade that. What are you going to do? Send brand new machines there. So it was well timed, and it was just kind of like an economic life cycle thing. That's all. But it's all about Paraguay, and we've been hedging positions in Sweden right now, about 2 cents, as I think Frank alluded to earlier. So that's great. So Sweden's a robust and sophisticated energy market. The one challenge, of course, has been that tax, which is really, it wasn't so much. There used to be a subsidy which alleviated that tax. What they did is they removed the subsidy. Not a crypto thing, a data center thing. So, you just kind of have to sit back and think, well, you see how a lot of countries are embracing data centers, and you look at the Stargate, right? And all the stuff happening in UAE and surely China, although they're a bit clandestine about what's really going on there. So, I think that Sweden's been a great place to do business. And so I hope that they see the light and they understand directionally data centers are the future, right? They're a national security asset, right? There's I would say a sovereign interest, in having more data centers within your borders. So I'm hopeful that sort of sorts itself out. And Johanna Thornblad, our country president, she does a tremendous job, and she, lobbies and campaigns and really helps the politicians that, might not have any understanding of technology at all, understand really how it works. So, I'm hopeful but look, all things considered, we still have what I would say a reasonably competitive overall electrical pricing. If you're hedging at 2 cents and you're maybe around a nickel, that's still, look, a lot of people are paying more than that, and you have the cool, dry climate and the other aspects. So that's good. And, Sweden is where we started our whole GPU HPC program, where we hit that $1 million of revenue annually. It was 400 GPUs. Then we moved to 4,000 GPUs, and we're at $10 million annualized revenue now. And so I know this is power mining analysis, but a little bit about the GPUs. We recently announced a $30 million investment. We have a 31 node NVIDIA H100 cluster with InfiniBand and a 64 node NVIDIA H200 cluster with InfiniBand. So rough numbers, right? Just keep it simple for you guys. The 32 node H100 cluster will add about $4 million of annualized revenue. in the H200 cluster, about 8 million. I'm giving you conservative, just, round numbers. You add that to the 10, it puts you at about 22 million of annualized revenue. And we look to hit that in the next few months here. The H100 cluster was actually configured in December, January. So we're looking to hand off to client in February. And the H200 cluster was shipped a couple weeks ago. So those are both operating out of Quebec, also using, hydro green energy. So I think that's really exciting. And the other component too is we have a portfolio of energy in our Canadian and Swedish properties that we own that we believe are ripe for conversion to tier 3. I think that's very exciting as well. But moreover, and we have talked about this, and I won't get into the details, but we have been planning our data centers. How can we build for next generation NVIDIA compute? What does that mean? Well, Frank and I were at NVIDIA HQ last year, twice actually, and we had a technical deep dive. Craig DeVars was down there with us, and he's been doing a phenomenal job helping us on the tier 3 data center component of our business. And it's all about liquid cooled high density power. And when I mean a high density, guys, back in the telecom days, like, it's how much power per rack can you fit? So you've got, maybe 15, 20 kilowatts per rack, right? Back in the telecom days. And then more recently, when H100s were, all the craze, it's about 45 kilowatts per rack is what you'd see in most tier 3 data centers running GPUs. The new Blackwell NVL72 from NVIDIA is 130 kilowatts per rack, and that is all liquid cooled. So think about that for a second. You start at 15 kilowatts per rack, then 45 kilowatts per rack, then 135. That's a factor of 3, triple every single time. And, when we talk to some of the OEMs, NVIDIA is talking about the B300, and then they've got Rubin, which is their next platform. So they've got this tech pipeline. We're hearing that in the future might be 250 kilowatts per rack. This is like, and so how do you plan for that? How do you build the infrastructure for that, right? So that's directionally where we're going in our HPC business as well. So I'll leave it there. I'd like
to add to it, Aydin.
Okay.
that I'm listening from 50,000 feet with the team, and we huddle every afternoon and issues we're dealing with. And it takes about 6 hours of those new cannons. So as they arrive, they're unpacked, hooked up, electrified, and making cash flow within 6 hours. When it comes to NVIDIA chips, the clusters that he's talking about, it's 6 weeks, not 6 hours, because you're building a brain. And it's really hard. It's just what it is, all the sensitivity. And for all those miners that are out there that are listening to your show, it's like Bitcoin mining is like driving a Bronco or a Ford 150 pickup truck. When you're dealing with NVIDIA H200s and 100s, it's like a McLaren or a Ferrari. And the mechanics, the machinery, the cost, what you pay a mechanic for fixing a McLaren or a Ferrari is much more than it's going to be for a Bronco. And so that to us is the big difference. And that's how we've been cutting our teeth on it. We still have this cash flow return on invested capital thought process of looking at things. Bitcoin mining get back in a year, and the HPC is 2 years, but it's more stable. And that's what we're doing. So we're happy that it throws off ample free cash flow. And as we go to build that out, so we'll have an announcement here soon of our new president for our Buzz HPC that has tremendous experience for this stuff. That is the building of these unique data centers. And so stay tuned. We're very excited about it. And in Texas, while I've been busy working, even last night, getting out to meet the head of the energy, the local that's electrifying Microsoft's $3 billion data center complex, all high performance computing. and see what the energy is here, but also in West Texas, some opportunities. So now that we'll be here, there's no doubt we will look for something that is in the great country of Texas, no doubt. And I really want to repeat that we felt much safer moving to Texas, our head office, one for getting a lower cost of capital functioning, but really we feel safer under this administration. And we feel that this administration not only is buying into Bitcoin ecosystem, they're buying into the AI to retool the government. If you look at the regulations, I was at an event the other night with Axelrod and who ran Obama's campaign, and they're on a joint with the Texas Capital Bank in Texas. And it was really interesting hearing the journey of how many regulations took place under Biden and versus under Obama. And so not only was there all this spending, but the regulations and the compliance for ESG and all this stuff would be strangulating. They're all getting pushed away. And going and looking at the military, that was very important because they're not going to cut those budgets. They're just going to be better allocators of capital. That's all. They're going to find where they're going to be much smarter decision-making on that allocation using the AI. And I know this from the gold business, so it does work. And so I'm thrilled about it. But I'm really thrilled about us moving here. We'll see something now to expand here in the US, but we're the biggest in Canada, and we're the biggest in Paraguay in the next 9 months. So we want to have that sort of strength and logistics of what we're doing. So stay tuned. We got lots of exciting things.
Yeah, just phenomenal to hear about all this innovation and development. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't ask about the recent news that came out on Monday this week. We talk about HPC, Aydin, as really a legacy company in this space. HIVE was one of the first ones in the HPC sector. I'm curious to get both of your opinion on the DeepSeek announcement and if you think this will be beneficial or detrimental to domestic HPC.
So they say that DeepSeek was trained with $6 million, but they also say if they're using H100s, they can't admit it, right? So it's definitely, $600 billion in NVIDIA market cap get wiped out. Like it's clearly like a coordinated, orchestrated thing. Ostensibly, DeepSeek is supposed to exhibit level 2 thinking, which really was first exhibited by OpenAI's ChatGPT 01, the version that was able to do graduate level math and science questions. But I really just think that, look, now Alibaba's come out and said, hey, we've got something that beats DeepSeek. So I think, China surely has hundreds, if not thousands of brilliant researchers, but I think really it's a 600 billion parameter model. Okay. ChatGPT is 1.8 trillion. You still need a lot of compute. I think the $6 million was just a disruptive thing they said to kind of, maybe do like a coordinated commercial espionage on American tech stocks, right? But surely, to train a foundational 600 billion parameter model, you're going to need a lot of compute, and that's really what I think. And people suggested that there were other smaller models as well. It's the 600 billion model, the only one that really has the level 2. And now Sam Altman has come out saying that they use portions of OpenAI for DeepSeek. So I think it's sort of like what's the right word? I don't know. It was definitely weird, right? And I did find it peculiar that something I'd never heard of, and I'm a tech CEO, suddenly became the #1 app overnight on the App Store. What? There you go.
We've seen this in the gold markets, and JP Morgan got fined. They put people from going away in jail, especially after 08, 09, on the LIBOR. Remember all the traders, Anthony, got charged, and some went to the Crowbar Hotel prison for that. And we saw the spoofing of gold markets, and that is to show that you have a big trade when there's a Chinese holiday. and all of a sudden selling begets selling because these algorithms in the trading markets, one relates to the other. What happened with this was really interesting to me. The week before, OpenChat supposedly gets hacked. And then on the Monday comes this news. But a Canadian company that's big in uranium, it fell 16%. Nuclear energy fell. Like, what does that have to do with that? Data centers fell. None of this works without data centers. And two, none of this works without energy. So someone had a very funny meme saying, yeah, they're mining Bitcoin for $99. That they're reinventing. And so I think it's orchestrated. And I know from my 35 years of the capital markets in the US, and prior to that, another 15 years in the capital markets. I'm aging myself now in the capital markets. These sort of events come out in the negative news on a Monday.
Yeah,
and you can see the sort of crack. And there was this big spoof of how big this was. Well, there should be greatly concerned because our analysts here, and one is Ukrainian, said we wouldn't open it in our system, but did it over in Europe, opened it in a separate sort of controlled box. And you can't ask it any questions that's negative about Hong Kong, Taiwan. Where did Xi Jinping get the Winnie the Pooh characterization, which he's made Winnie the Pooh basically illegal in China. That's how he was so offended, the dictator. None of this is allowed. Tiananmen Square is not allowed to be talked about. And so the question came back from our other IT that the methodology they have is really the biggest data grab ever. So if you're an American, you're a Brit, and you're a Canadian, and you upload that into your system, that data is going back to China. What that also shows is what we mentioned earlier, that John Evans, the three-star general that has come on as a strategic advisor that ran all of North America, Homeland Security, 3,000 soldiers, cybersecurity, and all of that, is that data centers are becoming sovereign assets. And what I just learned was the regulations in China to build a data center is extreme. Like, you just can't do what we're doing in any other country. Doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin mining, the data center control. But our data now, when you put that up on your phone, it's going to read everything on your phone, all your contacts, everything. And they'll be able to send that back to China. And I think that's a real concern when we were talking about earlier, Anthony, the Chinese in the past 5 years now have 127 ports in the world. In Panama, when they got control of the security of the port, Panama gave up its allegiance to Taiwan to give it for China to get that. And what Trump said is that they built it, America paid for it, and they sold it to Panama for Panama citizens, not for the Chinese, because the Chinese went and bought an island at the mouth of the Panama Canal for close to $1 billion. And then all of a sudden they start building oil tankers on there and a quasi runway, it's called. And so it's just another sort of military encampment that concerns the US. And data centers are very valuable. And we're seeing the attack on Riot to reposition their source of energy, repurposing 15 exahash in West Texas to go to HPC. And then last week was the announcement of $500 billion spend for HPC. $500 billion. And $100 billion was supposed to be Texas. And all of a sudden this news comes out and the data centers get knocked down and they're not needed. It's a great buying opportunity.
Hey, Anthony, I'll kick it back to you if you have any closing thoughts, and then we can wrap up here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered, everything we set out to do today. It was a great update on Monday. I mean, it probably caught a lot of people out there because we had you on the podcast literally a couple of weeks ago, and we were going through, your current growth strategy at your own site there in Paraguay, and then to go and tell the world you've now got another 200 megawatts. That'd be really pleasing for shareholders. I think one of the things they've looked at the last few years is, where was the growth coming from? Well, 2025, like you rightly say, I don't think any other miner will grow in terms of, from where you are at the moment to 25. That's a 300% increase in hash rate. So really, really pleased to hear about that. Pleased that, you've managed to visit the site and the time frame to get everything up and running. Looking forward to that hash rate coming online and getting towards that 500 million revenues a year in terms of Bitcoin mining. So yeah, really pleased for today. Thank you.
Most definitely.
Yes.
We kicked it off saying 25 is the year of Hive. You guys, Frank, you use the analogy of having a baby, but it sounds like each trimester we're going to get some nice updates this year. So thanks so much for the time, you guys. And
expecting triplets.
Oh, excellent. Well, a lot of preparation needed. Thanks so much for the time, you guys. Let us know in the comment section, what did you think of this major transformative acquisition? If you're holding Hive, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.